Good afternoon, everyone. After all, after I've got the graveyard shift, the one immediately after lunch, I'm not sure whether I'd rather have this or the one immediately before the football. Always a bit of a difficult call, that one. I'm here to talk about going direct and developing an effective proposition. You'll see there's a very fine photograph up there. I say that because I took it myself. It was very carefully chosen. That isn't just a random picture. That was very specifically chosen for this presentation. It's a picture of the Australian outback. You know, it's got that kind of arrowy bit, which gives you that sense of we're going direct. Those distant mountains, which suggest that new frontier, and obviously no people in it to distract your attention. And of course, we know why there are no Australians in that picture, and that is because the entire population of Australia is currently following Lady Gaga and Justin Bieber. So I've got 20 minutes to talk to you about developing an effective proposition. I'm going to say a bit about why this is a great time for direct, for lots of different players and for lots of different reasons. To talk about the role direct can play and how that can fit both in an advised and a non-advised journey. What that winning model might be, and also ask the question at the end, so who are customers going to turn to for advice? And talk about that. So let's kick off then and talk about direct, the new frontier. And of course, is it a new frontier? Because for those of us who've been around the industry for a while, direct's been around even longer than some of us. So going back to the 1980s with Sun Life Direct, and I think there's some interesting things we can learn from looking at these different models. So a very clear proposition, a very limited product range, a clear target market of the over 50s, daytime TV viewers, those people who can remember June Whitfield from before AbFab, and a very simple customer journey. So a successful business that continues to this day. The next one in line then is in 1995 we have those perennial new entrants, Virgin, and the Virgin Direct business. And that was a radical change when that came in. A very, very simple proposition. 2 funds, a pet wrapper, and apply on paper and over the phone, I think, initially, since that was before the good old days of the internet. So again, very, very clear, very simple proposition. And then the third one then, started last century, is Vantage from Hargreaves Lansdown. Obviously very well known these days. A simple proposition around discounted funds, but interestingly a much more complex product range. You compare that to the Virgin Direct approach, much different, but still the same idea of a very easy to use customer journey. So, without an advisor, direct can stand on its own and can form a successful business. However, it's never really broken through, and it's always been sat there whenever I've looked at it, kind of 5-10% of market, and never really got much bigger than that. The question is now, could this be the time for it to grow, and is it an opportunity for whom? So what's driving the growth of direct? And there's really kind of 4 elements to this, one of which is we're at last seeing some more new entrants. Estimates vary as to the number of orphans there's going to be in terms of orphan clients as a result of RDR, but that creates an opportunity clearly because those are disrupted individuals who will be looking for help. There's also been a change in technology. Technology's got a lot better, and that's enabling people to do far more in terms of tools and in terms of integration of information. And also, there's a change in customer behavior. Customers are much more used to using online. I'm going to talk about that. Something around about 20% of our customer base are regular users of online banking. So it's clearly an environment where people are now comfortable to do financial transactions. For advisors, it's also an opportunity for them too. Really facing a number of different challenges, partly reduce the cost to serve customers in order to be able to improve economics in a post-RDR world. Also potentially a way for retaining those low-value clients. And you can see a few models arriving at the moment where people are starting to see if they can build some sort of direct execution-only capability that will enable them to continue to serve clients who potentially it isn't financially viable to sit in front of them. And finally, to actually attract new clients. So it's not just the new entrants that are trying to grow their business. there's clearly a lot of advisors who would like to do that too. And then moving on to the manufacturers, the asset managers and the life cos, there's various estimates around potential loss of distribution in this sector. Anything up to 30% has been rumoured of IFAs who might leave the market. Steve earlier today, I think, mentioned somewhere between 8 and 12% in his surveys. They're looking for new ways of trying to get to customers. There's the issue of trying to retain those assets, and therefore, again, for the orphans, can they do something that will enable them to service them? And then finally, the margin pressure that's coming on everybody in the system at the moment. And then the final group are obviously the customers. Why are they going to drive the direct market? Well, partly because they aren't going to have an advisor anymore, in the case of some of them. Others are going to be simply unwilling to pay the price of advice. One of the key challenges that we face is I think this industry has done too good a job of persuading customers they've never paid for advice, that advice is free. And I think, having done such a good job of that, we're now bearing the burden of that. And we have to convince them that it's worthwhile. But as a consequence of that, they're simply not going to be willing to pay for it. And as I mentioned before, they're increasingly used to the idea of using the internet. So the question then is, what does Barclays know, besides having one of the leading stockbroking businesses, which is clearly online, about building a direct proposition? Well, we're not the only ones in this space who have found challenges. And in 2011, we announced a major change in strategy in our retail bank to focus on direct. The reality is delivering a consistent advised customer journey through a distributed network is challenging. The economics of such a model we found very difficult. And when we looked at forwards to RDR, we could only see that becoming more challenging. And therefore, the time was to prepare for post-RDR and to move early. And that was the decision we made. We started off, how do you start building a new proposition? That's, after all, the question on the card. And the answer is we did some research. And we're delighted to discover that somewhere around about a third of our customers were already using platforms, were already comfortable with the idea of doing that. And interestingly, that number varies quite considerably by subsegment. And some of the more attractive segments, such as the savvy affluent, that number goes up to somewhere around about 55%. So for those customers whom you might regard as being wedded to a face-to-face journey, many of them have already reached out or are online. And of those who weren't online, we found about 60% of them were receptive to the idea of an online proposition. The next question then is, what do they want? What do they want to see on that platform if they're going to go out there? And the answer was, they wanted tools, they wanted information, they wanted a relatively limited product range. And that's interesting, but go back to those models before. Is it about throwing everything at them, or is it about getting the right things in front of them? And the clear feedback was, don't give us too much. And then the other element of it was to give them multi-channel, that they wanted not just to do it over the internet, but also to have the telephone. But most of all, what came out top in research was the integration with online banking to be able to see all their assets in one place. A key challenge. You've got to remember, for most of our customers, and there are those hobby investors and those professional investors who enjoy investing, for most customers, financial services is credit cards and current accounts. That's where they go. That's what they're interested in. And for that reason, integrating it and having it in one place makes a big difference. What would make them choose between different providers? And there were two clear leaders in this, one of which was around the fund proposition and performance. And that was something around 36, 37% of people said that was kind of the key factor. And the other one was relationship. And I think that's really important and very interesting and challenging for the new entrants. Because for all that there is a generic sense of a loss of trust in banks, people by and large still do trust their bank that they bank with. And as a consequence of that, I think that does make it is a strong advantage for the incumbents and a challenge for those who are genuinely new as a brand new brand to this space. Part of our key decision was not to offer advice. And there are a number of reasons why we did that. Part of it is not everybody needs advice. This is some research that's been done. Somewhere over 40% of people say that they are very confident or somewhat confident in their ability to buy financial products. That clearly varies by product. And I think that's one of the complexities in this, is that it isn't that you get direct customers, face-to-face customers, execution-only customers, advised customers. It all depends on what they've got to do. And faced with a simple product purchase of a simple product that's easily reversible, there are a lot more customers who will go direct than faced with the prospect of buying an annuity or potentially buying a pension. And even for those who need advice, and it's always one of those interesting challenges actually, as you ask the question, do you need advice? We from the industry think about the regulated sense of that. Most customers, a bit like the money advice service, don't understand the difference between advice and guidance. And therefore, what they actually need is a bit of help, a bit of information, a few tools, and somebody to talk to them. Somebody just to reassure them that the decision they're making is the right call. So it isn't necessary, therefore, to have advice for this proposition, but you can integrate direct into an advice model. And this is kind of a simple 2x2, just dividing people between those who ignore advisors and those who rely on them. And then on the other dimension, really about the need for information, which is something to do, broadly correlates with their degree of engagement with financial services and what they want to do. And from that, you therefore get the classic 4 boxes. So starting with the self-directed, what can a direct proposition do for them? It's all about providing them with the information. It's about providing them with a place where they can seek the best products and prices and execute. For the avoiders, who are kind of the other extreme, the people who really don't want to engage in financial services, but kind of have this sense that they know they have to do something, a direct proposition can provide a very simple means for them to execute. But it's got to be delivered with a message that says, you have to do this now. It's got to be very clear for them why they would want to do it. Okay, so it's about making it a very, very straightforward proposition. For the use of advisors, for many of them, kind of the validators, what they're looking for is something somewhere that can just confirm that that advice they've been given is the right call. Something which will help reassure them that the advice they've received is correct. And a website, a direct proposition can do a lot to just provide that additional information. The kind of people like you have bought this sort of product, they perhaps look to those discussion groups and forums to see whether it's such a crazy idea for what they've been advised to do. And then finally, for the delegators, who don't really understand, who want somebody else to do it for them, then although they may not want to execute online, they want somebody to make it happen for them. They may still be interested in a proposition that will enable them to go online to see what's happening, to track their performance and progress. So the key message from that really is, if you're going to develop a direct proposition, what it does and how it does it depends on who your target customer is. But the other question is then, what exactly should the proposition deliver? And there's many different models coming out. And this is quite interesting because in the old days, we all developed those end-to-end models where we tried to do everything for the customer, where we tried to provide all the information, we tried to help them build the plan, to make the right selection, to purchase it, and then to manage it on an ongoing basis. And there was that full integrated journey. I think what's interesting at the moment is we're seeing that breaking down, and we're seeing some very distinct, separate propositions appearing. The financial planning bubble with the like of Money Vista, who are talking later, people like Nutmeg, where people are coming in very much around the early stages and breaking it from the product selection phase. And I think that's quite an interesting distinction. And obviously, given the rules around execution only and advice, there's a very clear regulatory sense as to why that's happening. And at the other end, we've got the fund supermarkets who've been around for a while, but also emerging more of these kind of sites that will do customer service. So as I said before, I think a number of advisors and manufacturers will produce more sites where people can manage their own business online, and also growth in discretionary services. And there was a referral to that earlier. I think there will be quite substantial growth in the discretionary management service area. I think the trickiest bit is advice. And we talked about this earlier today. That is kind of the big gap at the moment. And the question is there a technology solution that can deliver good quality advice through a direct proposition? particularly through an online one. About a dozen years ago, I was involved in a pilot of video advice, and it was just too early. The bandwidth wasn't there, the technology wasn't there. We have moved on light years now. And at Barclays, we're currently piloting some stuff in other product areas where we're looking to set up just that kind of video capability. So I think it's a really interesting, a really exciting area, and a possibility that in the future we may well see competitors coming in who won't do face-to-face advice, but will continue to do individual personal advice, but intermediated by technology. But then the next question is, so where else are they going to go to get that advice and help? And again, back to the point, I'm not sure, I'm pretty sure that most people don't have a partner or friend who's a regulated advisor. So when people say, where are they turning to for advice, they mean help. And if you look at the data, and these two colors on this chart relate over a period of only about 3 years between 2009 and 2012, friends and family, banks and building societies remain important places for people to go. The big change you see between these two surveys is the internet, website, forums. And we talked about this earlier on as well around the importance of social media. What's interesting is that share or that percentage of people who go to those places has more than doubled from about 15% to 33%. And that, I suspect, is largely driven by this. And that is the number of people now who are talking to other people on the internet. We've seen that go from less than about 5% in 2006 to somewhere around about 60% in 2012, and is projected to get to about 80% in 2020. And Facebook and Twitter, I think, provide a real challenge for established players. It's a really interesting question as to what you can do in this area. Can you join in? I've worked for a number of large companies in my career, and the time it takes to get any sort of external communication signed off is measured, if you're lucky, in days and potentially in weeks. So the idea of trying to have a Twitter conversation with somebody is almost impossible. And I've worked with many places where the compliance warnings would be at least 140 characters, which tends to make a very repetitive conversation with your customers, and not a very informative one. I've even been one place where we got it down to about 130, which left you with about 10 characters, which was just about enough to say to the customer, don't do it. But what do you do if you want to participate? You've got to find a way, therefore, of creating a mechanism to be able to empower some people to communicate on your behalf. And again, we're working on that at the moment, and have empowered a number of people in the organization to be able to interact. The key here is it's got to be spontaneous. You've got to be quick, and that's a real challenge in organizations that are used to having a lot of control. If you want to participate, do you try and use it just to handle queries, or do you try and be more proactive in what you do? And the other question is, to what degree do you want to try and host those conversations? I think it's a really interesting regulatory challenge as to where we stand and where the regulator is going to look if we're seen to be providing forums where we have lots of people providing advice to people on an entirely unregulated basis. So I think it's an interesting model. So the world is there. I think that's one of those areas which is clearly going to grow. And the question is, how do we make the most of it? So that's broadly the gist of what I wanted to say. So just to recap, what's important to do? Start with your clear strategy. Why are you doing this? Why build a direct proposition? As I said at the beginning, I think there are lots of good reasons why you may want to go direct. I think the next element is really understand the needs of your target customers. What is it they want to do? What is it they know? So how much information do you provide? It's very easy to try and throw as much as possible at them, and that isn't always the right answer, and that's certainly part of the learning we've had from our proposition. In terms of marketing, the great delight of an online proposition is you can turn on and off marketing on and off very quickly, but that does need a lot of active tracking and a lot of monitoring, but it is a great strength. The customer journey is critical. And again, go back to those early models. A lot of those early models, very, very simple customer journey. And I think get the journey as short as you can whilst providing the right balance of information for the client. The challenge is always, how do you make sure that you're providing enough information for the customer to make the right decision? Integrate. I think integration with other channels is critical. I think trying to build pure standalone online businesses, direct to customer, I think is difficult unless it's very focused. I think the success will come largely from those who manage to integrate it into other channels. And that may include integrating it with face-to-face. And finally, be prepared to change. That classic Donald Rumsfeld quote, the one thing we do know is that we don't know what it's going to be like in the future. So be prepared to be flexible, and whatever model is developed, make sure you can change it easily. Hope that was useful, and look forward to taking any questions later. Thank you.